Here's the brutal truth. Everything you were taught about life, power, and respect was a lie. From the moment you were born, society, teachers, even your own family drilled into your head the poisonous idea that kindness, fairness, and vulnerability would earn you love, respect, and success. But look around. Is that what happened? Or did showing weakness invite exploitation, disrespect, and betrayal? You were programmed like a pawn in a psychological war you didn't even know you were fighting. The matrix of modern culture trains men to be soft, agreeable, apologetic, and dependent. Perfect prey for ruthless players who operate by darker, older rules. While you're told to be nice, they are taught to dominate. While you wait to be chosen, they choose. While you hope for fairness, they weaponize reality itself against you. And here's what will shock you. None of this is new. 500 years ago, one man saw through the lies. Niccolò Machiavelli, hated, feared, banned, but never forgotten, exposed the brutal mechanics of power. He uncovered truth so dangerous that rulers hid his book The Prince, branding it evil. But the truth is this: Machiavelli wasn't evil, he was honest. He didn't sugarcoat reality, he tore the mask off human nature and revealed how power really works. And the reason you've been weak, disrespected, and overlooked is because you've been living by rules designed to keep you powerless. That ends today. In this video, I will arm you with 8 ruthless principles from Machiavelli's philosophy that will transform your mind into a fortress. Think of them as psychological armor: cold, unbreakable, unstoppable. Once you put on this armor, no insult can pierce you, no manipulation can trap you, and no enemy can defeat you. But let me warn you, once you see these truths, there is no going back. You cannot unsee reality. You cannot return to being naive. You will either step into the ruthless clarity of power or remain a victim forever. Most men are too weak to hear what I'm about to say. They'll click away, retreat into denial, and keep living small. But you, if you're still here, you are different. You are ready to become dangerous. Over the next 25 minutes, I will reveal the 8 Machiavellian principles that will harden your mind and make you immune to psychological slavery. These are not theories. These are weapons. Weapons forged in centuries of war, betrayal, and survival. Weapons that will allow you to command respect without begging, to control situations without shouting, and to dominate every interaction without lifting a finger. Here's my challenge for you right now. Type in the comments, "I refuse to be psychologically dominated." That's your declaration of war against weakness. That's your entry point into a new reality. Because from this moment on, your old self is dead. The weak, apologetic version of you has no place here. What you're about to learn will make you feared where you were once ignored, respected where you were once dismissed, and powerful where you were once powerless. This is not just information. This is transformation. This is Machiavelli's armor for the mind. Here's what's going to shock you. Fairness is not real. It's a story invented to keep you obedient. You were told that if you play by the rules, if you're fair, if you do the right thing, life will reward you. But look around. The ruthless win, the loud are heard, and the cunning take what they want. Fairness is a prison for the naive. The brutal truth is that fairness is not about justice. It's about control. Society tells men to be fair because fairness makes you predictable, and predictable men are easy to dominate. When you cling to fairness, you put chains on yourself while your rivals roam free. You wait for the world to even things out, while others rig the game in their favor. Psychologically, fairness satisfies a deep craving for certainty. The human mind wants balance. It wants order. But Machiavelli knew this was a weakness. When you believe in fairness, you blind yourself to strategy. You assume others will play by the same rules, and that's where you get destroyed, because they don't. Machiavelli once said, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." This means that what looks like betrayal to you is simply strategy to them. They will promise fairness when it benefits them, and they will break it the second it doesn't. The man who still clings to fairness is crushed by reality. Imagine this. You're at work. You stay late, you cover for others, you follow every rule. You expect fairness to reward you with recognition. But what happens? Someone else, less hardworking but more politically savvy, gets the promotion. Why? Because he understood the game wasn't about fairness. It was about influence. He shook the right hands, he built the right alliances, and he wasn't afraid to bend the rules. Meanwhile, you sit there bitter, confused, powerless. Here's where most men fail. They think fairness will protect them. But fairness is not protection, it's exposure. It makes you passive, waiting for justice that never comes. Men who worship fairness are men who stay stuck. Men who reject fairness become dangerous. So how do you implement this? Stop expecting balance. Assume nothing is fair. When you enter a situation, think, everyone here is protecting their own interest. I must do the same. That shift alone makes you unpredictable, strategic, and immune to manipulation. When you stop demanding fairness, you start commanding respect. Weak men cry about fairness. Strong men exploit reality. Declare it now in the comments. I will never rely on fairness again. Here's what will blow your mind. The obsession with being liked is destroying you. From childhood, you were programmed to seek approval, smile, comply, nod your head, avoid conflict. And what did that conditioning create? A man terrified of rejection, a man who sacrifices his own power just to keep others comfortable. But here's the brutal truth. When your priority is being liked, you automatically surrender authority. Because the moment someone senses that your identity depends on their approval, they control you. They can withdraw their smiles, their praise, their validation, and you will bend. That is not power, that is slavery. Psychologically, the addiction to approval rewires your brain. Each time you get likes, whether literal social media likes or subtle social validation, your dopamine spikes. It feels good, so you chase more. But this makes you dependent on external rewards instead of internal command. And a man who depends on approval will never command respect. Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." This means that love is conditional, fragile, and unreliable, but fear, or rather, respect, endures. Being liked is temporary. Being respected is permanent. Picture this. You're in a group of friends. Someone makes a joke at your expense. The weak man laughs along, hoping everyone still likes him. The strong man goes silent, locks eyes, and changes the dynamic instantly. One is liked, briefly. The other is respected, permanently. Which man do you want to be? This is where most men fail. They believe being nice is strength. But niceness without boundaries is weakness. The man who tries to please everyone pleases no one, least of all himself. The man who is willing to disappoint, to say no, to enforce his line, that man is untouchable. Implementation is simple but ruthless. Test yourself by saying no, where you usually say yes. Withhold approval. Let silence replace laughter. Show that your self-worth is not negotiable. Every time you do this, your mind becomes a fortress, and others instinctively feel your authority. Weak men chase approval. Strong men command respect. Comment this declaration right now. I choose respect over approval. Here's what will shock you. Silence is not weakness. It is the most lethal weapon in psychological warfare. Most men crumble in silence. They feel the need to fill every pause, to explain, to justify, to prove themselves. But the man who masters silence becomes terrifying, because silence forces others to confront their own insecurity. But here's the brutal truth. People reveal their power level in how they handle silence. Weak men panic when the air goes quiet. Strong men use silence like a blade. They let others squirm, over-explain, and expose their weaknesses. That is the true power of strategic silence. It makes others bleed information while you reveal nothing. Psychologically, silence triggers anxiety. The human brain craves resolution, so when you refuse to give it, the other person feels compelled to speak, to confess, to prove, to fill the void. And in that scramble, they hand you control. This is why interrogators, negotiators, and ruthless leaders All use silence as their deadliest tool. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." This means that while the fool rushes to fill space with words, the wise man uses restraint to strike at the right moment. Silence is not absence, it is strategy. Picture this, you're negotiating a salary. The weak man blurts out, "I'll take whatever you think is fair." The strong man states his number, then shuts his mouth. The silence grows heavy. The employer feels the weight and eventually caves. One man submits, the other commands. This is where most men fail. They equate talking with power. But in reality, talking too much exposes neediness. The man who is silent controls the rhythm. He sets the battlefield on his terms. Implementation is ruthless but simple. In your next conversation, resist the urge to fill the pause. Make silence your ally. Hold eye contact. Let them feel the pressure. The more you can weaponize silence, the more unstoppable your psychological dominance becomes. Weak men fear silence. Strong men command silence. Comment this declaration right now. My silence is my weapon. Here's what will blow your mind. Failure is not your enemy. Weakness is. Most men treat setbacks as proof that they are not good enough, that they should give up, that life is unfair. But the men who rise above the herd understand a brutal truth. Every setback is raw energy that can either destroy you or forge you into something terrifyingly stronger. But here's the brutal truth. Weak men collapse under pressure. They drown in self-pity, complain about their circumstances, and wait for someone to rescue them. Strong men absorb pain, transmute it, and weaponize it into forward momentum. This is the alchemy of psychological warfare, taking what was meant to break you and turning it into firepower. Psychologically, the brain links failure with shame. Society programmed you to believe that mistakes define your worth. But when you strip away that illusion, failure becomes information, feedback that sharpens you. The man who reframes failure is untouchable because he no longer fears loss. He converts rejection into resilience, betrayal into clarity, defeat into strategy. Machiavelli once said, "Never was anything great achieved without danger." This means that greatness is inseparable from risk, and risk is inseparable from setbacks. The man who demands a safe life will never wield power. The man who embraces setbacks as part of his arsenal becomes unstoppable. Here's a practical scenario. Imagine you launch a business and it collapses. The weak man curses the world and never tries again. The strong man dissects what went wrong, refines his approach, and relaunches twice as sharp. The setback didn't destroy him, it fueled him. By the third attempt, he dominates. This is where it gets sinister. Once you master this frame, people can no longer control you with failure. They can't humiliate you, they can't shame you, and they can't break you. You become terrifying, because every hit only makes you stronger. Implementation is clear. The next time you face rejection, betrayal, or loss, write down the lesson. Strip the emotion, weaponize the data, and reload. Train yourself to smile at setbacks, because you know they are fuel for your dominance. Weak men break under failure. Strong men forge empires from it. Declare in the comments, "Setbacks are my fuel." Here's what's going to shock you. The man who cannot control his emotions will always be controlled by someone who can. Weak men believe that expressing every feeling makes them authentic, but in the brutal arena of power, authenticity without control is suicide. Emotional discipline is not repression, it is weaponization. It's the art of deciding when, how, and if an emotion should ever be revealed. But here's the brutal truth. The majority of men are emotional slaves. They lash out when angry, collapse when sad, and beg when anxious. Every reaction they show becomes ammunition for others to use against them. A man who cannot govern himself cannot govern anything else. Strong men, however, turn their emotions into silent weapons. They can feel anger, but channel it into focus. They can feel fear, but transmute it into strategy. They can feel desire, but delay gratification until the timing guarantees victory. Psychologically, emotions are primal signals designed to push you into instant reaction. The herd follows them blindly, which is why they are predictable and weak. But the disciplined mind intercepts these signals, processes them, and chooses a strategic response. This is the essence of psychological dominance. Your enemy acts impulsively while you act with precision. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." This means discipline creates timing, and timing creates advantage. If your opponent burns himself out in rage, you conserve energy and strike when his defenses are down. If others panic under pressure, your calm presence makes you appear like a fortress of steel. Here's a real-world example. Imagine you're in an argument at work. A weak man yells, loses composure, and exposes his insecurity. A strong man listens silently, maintains eye contact, and responds with a calm statement that dismantles the opponent's credibility. Who is respected? The one who did not flinch. Here's what will blow your mind. Emotional discipline is the deadliest form of control because it's invisible. People will try to provoke you, bait you, test you. When you don't react, they grow unstable. When you remain composed, they reveal themselves. This flips the battlefield. You control the pace, the energy, the outcome. Implementation is simple, but ruthless. Every time you feel the surge of emotion, pause. Breathe. Do not let the first reaction escape. Choose silence. Choose calculation. Over time, this becomes your armor, your shield, your weapon. Weak men are prisoners of impulse. Strong men are masters of discipline. Comment this declaration. My emotions obey me. Here's what's going to shock you. Your constant hunger for approval is the very chain keeping you weak. From childhood, you were programmed to seek validation. From parents, teachers, friends, and eventually society itself. Every good job, every like, every nod of approval has wired your brain to depend on external permission to feel worthy. And that is psychological slavery. But here's the brutal truth. Men who crave approval will always bend. They'll compromise their values, dilute their strength, and sell their soul for a pat on the back. Weak men obsess over being liked. Strong men obsess over being respected. One is dependent, the other is untouchable. Psychologically, the addiction to approval operates like any drug. The dopamine hit of acceptance makes you crave more, and when you're deprived of it, you feel withdrawal. This is why men act out of fear of rejection, why they stay silent when they should speak, why they overcompensate to please others. The cage is invisible, but the bars are real. Machiavelli once said, "He who seeks to be loved will fall." This means dependence on approval leads to collapse because it places your power in the hands of others. The moment you need to be liked, you give away control. Respect, on the other hand, is rooted in fear, authority, and consistency, and it cannot be taken unless you surrender it. Here's a practical example. Think of the man who constantly explains himself, apologizes unnecessarily, and begs to be understood. He thinks he's gaining acceptance, but people lose respect for him. Now think of the man who speaks once, with clarity and conviction, and doesn't care if everyone agrees. That man is respected because his self-worth is untouchable. But the most dangerous part is this. Society wants you addicted. Social media is designed to weaponize approval. Likes, shares, comments. Every beep and notification rewires your brain to chase external validation instead of building internal authority. And a man who lives for approval will die without it. Implementation. Detach yourself from the need to be liked. Start small. Say no without explanation. Refuse to justify your decisions. Stand firm when challenged. Build your worth internally. The man who doesn't beg for approval becomes magnetic, mysterious, and feared. Weak men die for likes. Strong men live for respect. Comment this declaration. I reject approval. Here's what will blow your mind. The more available you are, the less you are valued. Society teaches you to always be accessible, always say yes, always show up. But the brutal truth is this. Abundance breeds indifference. Scarcity creates desire. When you are everywhere, you are ignored. When you are rare, you are irresistible. Most men fail here. They confuse constant presence with importance. They think being always available makes them reliable, when in reality, it makes them forgettable. Weak men flood the world with their time, their words, their attention, and end up being taken for granted. Strong men, on the other hand, ration themselves like gold. They understand that scarcity multiplies value. Psychologically, this principle is simple. The human brain craves what it cannot easily have. We desire the scarce because it signals power, status, and uniqueness. When you give yourself away too freely, people subconsciously devalue you. But when you withdraw, when you limit access, your presence becomes a privilege, and people fight for it. Machiavelli once said, "Men desire what they rarely see." This means strategic scarcity is not weakness, but dominance. By controlling your availability, you train others to chase your approval instead of the other way around. This is psychological warfare disguised as discipline. Example: consider the man who replies instantly to every message, who is always free, who accepts every invitation. He's convenient but disposable. Now think of the man who responds when he chooses, who declines more than he accepts, who makes others wait. He becomes a figure of authority. His scarcity creates respect, intrigue, and even obsession. But the sinister part is this: society conditions you to think that being scarce makes you arrogant. They'll call you selfish, distant, or cold. That's because they fear losing their grip on your availability. The truth is, the man who is scarce forces others to adapt to his frame, and that is ultimate power. Implementation: stop being endlessly available. Protect your time like a fortress. Decline more often. Speak less, but with impact. Be seen rarely, but remembered always. Make your presence an event, not a routine. Weak men drown in abundance. Strong men weaponize scarcity. Comment this declaration: my presence is rare. Here is the paradox of power. The loudest man in the room is usually the weakest. True authority does not need constant noise. It is silent, calculated, and undeniable. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the sharpest weapon in psychological warfare. Weak men fear silence. They rush to fill every gap with words, apologies, or explanations. But strong men know that silence creates pressure, mystery, and fear. When you do not react, when you do not explain, when you do not defend, people project their insecurities onto the silence, and that is where your dominance takes root. Machiavelli hinted at this truth. Power is preserved through control, and nothing signals control more than measured silence. The man who can remain calm and unreadable when provoked radiates an aura of strength. People fear what they cannot predict, and silence makes you unpredictable. Think about it. In arguments, the man who talks endlessly reveals his weakness. The man who pauses, waits, and then speaks only a few cutting words. He controls the entire frame. In relationships, the one who withdraws instead of chasing holds the emotional high ground. In business, the negotiator who embraces silence forces the other side into desperation. Silence forces others to reveal themselves while you remain concealed. The psychology is brutal but effective. Humans hate uncertainty, and silence creates it. By withholding words, you withhold certainty, and people become obsessed with earning your approval, your reaction, your validation. That obsession is power. But here's the sinister truth. Silence requires discipline. It's easy to talk, to defend, to argue. It takes strength to remain silent, to hold your ground, to let the other person drown in their own words. Weak men crumble under the discomfort of silence. Strong men weaponize it. Implementation. The next time you're insulted, criticized, or pressured, resist the urge to defend yourself. Pause. Breathe. Say nothing. Let silence echo louder than their words. You'll notice the shift immediately. They lose composure and you gain control. Silent dominance is not about speaking less. It's about making your silence thunder. Comment this: my silence commands respect. You began this journey as one man, and you are ending it as another. At the start, you were carrying invisible chains, the chains of weakness, of conditioning, of psychological slavery. You were taught to smile when you should have remained silent, to apologize when you had done nothing wrong, to seek approval instead of commanding respect. That programming was designed to keep you powerless, docile, and under control. But across these 8 principles, you have been armed with something far more dangerous: Machiavelli's armor for the mind. You now understand that fairness is a trap designed to keep you submissive. You know that being liked makes you weak, and that those who seek popularity are the first to be destroyed. You've learned the dark power of silence, the ability to turn setbacks into psychological fuel, and the mastery of emotional discipline that makes you untouchable. You've faced the brutal truth of approval addiction, and now you know how to destroy it. You've seen how scarcity creates magnetic influence, and how silent dominance becomes ultimate power. Step by step, you've been stripped of illusions. The soft lies that kept you weak have been replaced with hard truths that make you dangerous. This is not self-help. This is not motivation. This is transformation through psychological warfare. Here is the brutal truth. Every day that you delay applying these principles, you fall further behind. While you hesitate, more ruthless men are already using these weapons. They're securing power, influence, and respect while you debate whether you're ready. And by the time you decide, it may already be too late. This is why action is not optional. Action is survival. The weak man thinks he has time. The strong man understands that time is war, and every day is a battle for respect, dominance, and control. If you walk away from this video unchanged, nothing in your life will improve. You'll return to the same cycle, apologizing, pleasing, explaining, and surrendering. But if you embrace these principles, fully, ruthlessly, unapologetically, you will become unstoppable. Remember this: people do not respect words. They respect results. They respect silence. They respect discipline. They respect power. And now you carry the blueprint of power within you. Here's your moment of decision. You can close this video and return to weakness, or you can prove, right now, that you are ready for transformation. Like this video to show that you refuse to remain naive. Share this with someone who desperately needs to awaken. Subscribe, because these lessons are only the beginning of your transformation. And finally, comment this declaration of supreme power: I am unstoppable, because that is what you are now. A fortress mind, a ruthless strategist, a man armored with Machiavelli's timeless wisdom. You are no longer fragile. You are no longer weak. You are no longer a victim of psychological chains. From this moment forward, you are unstoppable.